At a time when Ethiopia is opening up, French President Macron sealed a deal with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in March 2019. France signaled plans to invest up to 100 million euros in the African giant. The agreement also had a military component where the provisions mention air cooperation, joint exercises, equipment purchases, as well as goals to reconstruct an Ethiopian navy. There's just one problem. Ethiopia is a landlocked nation. I'm your host Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. Due to the sensitive nature of our content, some national firewalls block our videos. NordVPN allows you to bypass such firewalls by using double encryptions to hide your IP. This ensures your privacy and security on the web, and it's among the reasons why it gets all the green checks on PC Mac. If you go to nordvpn.com/CaspianReport or use the link in the description, you'll get a 75% discount on the 3-year plan. And if you use the promo code CaspianReport, you'll get an additional month for free. Now back to Ethiopia's naval ambitions. Nearly 3 decades ago, Ethiopia lost its coastal territories to Eritrea. The bitter border conflict resulted in an independent Eritrea as well as the dissolution of the Ethiopian Navy. In the following decades, there was little reason to reconsider a navy, but all that started to change in 2018. Since coming to office, Prime Minister Abiy has been putting his country's affairs in order. He has worked on a peace deal with Eritrea, integrated more closely with Djibouti, Somalia, and Sudan, initiated numerous socio-political reforms, made significant progress to liberalize parts of the economy, all the while maintaining inter-ethnic tensions. Abimania is what the Ethiopians call it. And although the country still has a long way to go, it is clear that when all is said and done, Ethiopia is bound to re-emerge as a heavyweight power in East Africa. Its flourishing economy, which now ranks as Africa's fastest growing, and the vast human pool of 102 million citizens has grabbed the attention of great powers. In line with the re-emerging role of Ethiopia, the Prime Minister wants to remake his country as a regional hub for commerce and trade. However, to reassure investors that the waters around the Horn of Africa are secure, especially considering the incidents of piracy, Addis Ababa feels obliged to step up and protect its maritime trading routes. This also happens to be one of Ethiopia's long-term geopolitical objectives. So by re-establishing a navy, Abiy is adding a maritime component to his overall drive. The country has already acquired stakes in the ports of Djibouti, Sudan, and even the self-declared Somaliland. But Ethiopian policymakers believe that only by officially re-establishing a navy can they convince the outside world that the Horn of Africa is open for business. At first glance, it sounds odd that a landlocked nation should seek for a navy. But landlocked navies exist in many parts of the world, particularly in countries where a river or a lake forms a national border. Thus, with the exception of the Caspian nations, landlocked navies operate strictly in major lakes or rivers. What makes Ethiopia's case unique is that the state is seeking for a blue water fleet to operate along the coast of the Horn of Africa, which is a vast area. Yet, there is more to it. An Ethiopian navy would mean a win-win for the regional nations. While the current coastal countries enjoy access to the world's oceans, they lack the capabilities to patrol their waters and facilitate trade. Ethiopia, however, has the opposite problem. It possesses the most resources but lacks a coast. Precisely because Addis Ababa lacks a shoreline, the regional nations do not necessarily see an Ethiopian navy as a threat, but as a complementary force. The idea is that by constructing a navy, Ethiopia gains leverage in the regional maritime affairs, but as a trade-off, the Ethiopians would also have to develop the capabilities of their neighbors to reinforce their coastal interests. So Ethiopia's landlocked navy would patrol and protect the waters of the Horn of Africa while also investing capital in stabilizing the coastal states. This trade-off would contribute to integrate the region economically and politically while reducing cross-border violence. In an area that has been plagued for decades by territorial conflicts, this is a welcome change. But talk is cheap, and constructing a navy from scratch is an expensive undertaking. Technically, Ethiopia could acquire a few dozen patrol boats and call it a day. That is in fact what is most likely to occur in the next few years, with the navy serving a symbolic purpose. Eventually, Addis Ababa will want a blue water navy with surface capabilities. That's when the real work starts, for it will require the state to train sailors, officers, and commanders, but also find suitable bases and procure larger vessels. This is a long-term project that will take decades to complete. In the meantime, the build-up of the navy will be subject to future political and economic developments. So, considering the long-term commitment that is required to construct a navy, Ethiopia needs international partners. The most immediate host for an Ethiopian navy would be the Republic of Djibouti. The small but strategically important nation already hosts military bases from numerous countries, including France, China, the United States, and many others. Djibouti also happens to enjoy close economic ties with Ethiopia. In fact, about 95% of Ethiopia's imports and exports go through the port of Dorale, which is an extension of Djibouti port. In recent years, Ethiopia has acquired a significant stake in the port, and a new railway, opened in 2017, has increased the movement of goods to and from Dorale port. The link between Addis Ababa and Dorale is the former's primary lines of communication with the global community. However, the presence of foreign military bases in Djibouti worries Ethiopian policymakers. Djibouti may not always have say over its own affairs, and that is a security risk. So even though Djibouti is where we will most likely see the first Ethiopian vessels set sail, Addis Ababa will want to avoid putting all its eggs in one basket. If some political development results in the breakdown of relations between Ethiopia and Djibouti, the Ethiopian navy would be placed in a vulnerable position. So eventually, as the Ethiopian Blue Water Navy becomes operational, it will require basing rights in other countries. Convincing the Eritreans will be difficult due to the troublesome history that is still in living memory, but basing rights in Assab and Massawa will be necessary for the long term nevertheless. In Somalia, meanwhile, relations between Addis Ababa and Mogadishu have improved significantly, and the Somalian ports of Kismayo and Bosaso are well suited for large navies. However, the activity of Al-Shabaab and the lack of infrastructure in Somalia impede close cooperation in the near future. On that account, Ethiopia has acquired a 19% stake in the port of Berbera, which belongs to the self-declared Somaliland, and there are plans to link the two by infrastructure. At the same time, in Sudan, the Ethiopians have agreed to develop Port Sudan, but the details remain vague. Another possible location for a naval base is Kenya. In May 2018, Ethiopian and Kenyan lawmakers agreed to speed up the acquisition of land in the Kenyan island of Lamu as part of the Lamu Corridor, which seeks to establish a transport passage connecting South Sudan and Ethiopia to the Kenyan port. All these developments seek to diversify Ethiopia's options for trading routes and naval bases. Essentially, the more basing rights Ethiopia has, the more flexibility its navy would gain. In addition to shopping for ports, the Ethiopian leadership will also have to contend with other regional players with vested interests in the Horn of Africa, such as Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, as well as China and the United States. However, there are also potential allies in the periphery, such as France and the United Arab Emirates. France is the most obvious partner, as it signed a deal to help re-establish the Ethiopian navy. By doing so, Paris is seeking to expand its influence beyond the Francophone sphere into East Africa. French multinational firms such as Orange, Total, Avera, as well as a host of other defense companies seek to capitalize on the growing and liberalizing Ethiopian economy. Another potential partner is the United Arab Emirates, which currently has a naval presence in Eritrea as well as unrecognized Somaliland. What's interesting here is that France operates a naval base in the United Arab Emirates, and the two maintain a strategic level of military cooperation since they operate in many of the same areas. If Addis Ababa plays its cards right, it could forge a lasting partnership with France and the United Arab Emirates, which would go a long way in developing a capable navy. It goes without saying that Ethiopia's pursuit of regional power could come crashing down if the internal ethnic tensions remain unaddressed. Prime Minister Abiy has embarked on a roadmap for reconciliation, but there remain pockets of secessionists across the country, and social unrest continues to flare up from time to time. As recently as June 2019, there was a failed coup attempt where armed forces tried to take over a regional government in the country. The whereabouts of the rogue general that orchestrated the coup remain unknown. Events like these reveal that the central government still does not have full control over the domestic political situation despite all the progress being made. Therefore, beyond the obvious geographic shortcomings for a blue water navy, Ethiopia must stabilize its internal landscape, elsewise the government may face a situation where it would be left with no choice but to hit the brakes on its ambitious naval project. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Producing original content like this takes time, tools, and funds. YouTube's native ads are of little help, so we couldn't have done it without our gracious contributors on Patreon. It is because of their support Caspian Report remains independent and self-sufficient. If you want to be part of that, visit patreon.com/CaspianReport and please consider joining. For now, thank you for your patience and Sahol.